Arachnophobia, the spider fear that ruins camping. Arachnophobia is like having your brain treat every tiny spider as if it's a velociraptor actively hunting you for sport. It's the most common specific phobia in the world, affecting up to 6% of the global population, which means there are hundreds of millions of people who would rather burn their house down than deal with a spider in the bathroom. This phobia likely has evolutionary roots because some spiders are genuinely dangerous, and our ancestors who were appropriately cautious around potentially venomous creatures were more likely to survive and reproduce. Your brain inherited a spider detection system that's so sensitive it treats all spiders as threats, even the tiny house spiders that couldn't hurt you if they tried. What makes arachnophobia particularly irrational is that the fear response is often completely disproportionate to the actual threat. People will jump on chairs, scream, or refuse to enter rooms where they've seen a spider, even though most spiders are smaller than a paperclip and more afraid of humans than humans are of them. The phobia often involves not just fear of spiders themselves, but fear of spider webs, pictures of spiders, or even the word spider. Some people with severe arachnophobia can have panic attacks just from seeing a spider on television or hearing someone describe encountering one. Arachnophobia can significantly impact daily life. People might avoid basements, attics, gardens, or outdoor activities entirely. Some individuals will refuse to go camping, hiking, or even walk through certain areas where spiders might be present, limiting their recreational and sometimes professional opportunities. Treatment for arachnophobia typically involves exposure therapy, where people gradually work up from looking at cartoon spiders to eventually being in the same room as a real spider. The success rate is quite high, but many people with spider phobias prefer to simply organize their lives around avoiding spiders rather than confronting the fear directly. Claustrophobia, the space panic that traps you. Claustrophobia is like having your brain's fire alarm system go off every time you're in an enclosed space, creating an overwhelming urge to escape even when you're perfectly safe. It's the fear of being trapped or confined in small spaces, and it can turn routine activities like using elevators, flying in airplanes, or getting MRI scans into panic-inducing ordeals. This phobia likely evolved from legitimate survival concerns about being trapped in caves, underground spaces, or other confined areas where escape might be impossible. Your ancestors who had a healthy fear of tight spaces were less likely to get stuck somewhere and die, so modern brains still carry this ancient warning system. Claustrophobia symptoms can include rapid heartbeat, sweating, trembling, shortness of breath, and an overwhelming urge to escape. The physical symptoms often make the situation worse because feeling like you can't breathe in a small space confirms your brain's assessment that the space is dangerous. What makes claustrophobia particularly challenging is that it can be triggered by spaces that aren't objectively small, but just feel confining based on the person's perception. Some people feel claustrophobic in crowded rooms, cars with locked doors, or even outdoor spaces where they feel hemmed in by buildings or terrain. The phobia can significantly impact medical care, as people with claustrophobia might avoid necessary medical procedures like MRIs, CT scans, or surgeries that require anesthesia. They might also avoid certain career paths, travel methods, or recreational activities that involve confined spaces. Treatment often involves gradual exposure to increasingly confined spaces while teaching relaxation techniques and coping strategies. Virtual reality therapy has also become popular for claustrophobia, allowing people to practice being in confined spaces without actually being physically trapped. Agoraphobia, the outside world that became the enemy. Agoraphobia is like having your brain decide that anywhere you can't easily escape or get help is a potential death trap, making the outside world feel like a dangerous obstacle course rather than a place for normal human activities. Contrary to popular belief, it's not just fear of open spaces. It's fear of situations where escape might be difficult or help unavailable. This phobia often develops after panic attacks, where the person becomes terrified of having another panic attack in a situation where they felt trapped or unable to get help. The brain starts associating certain environments with danger, gradually expanding the list of unsafe places until normal life becomes nearly impossible. Agoraphobia can include fear of crowded places, public transportation, shopping malls, bridges, or even leaving the house alone. In severe cases, people become completely housebound, unable to work, shop, or maintain social relationships without significant distress. What makes agoraphobia particularly devastating is how it can progressively worsen if untreated. The more situations a person avoids, the more their brain interprets those situations as dangerous, creating a vicious cycle where the safe zone keeps shrinking until they're trapped in their own home. The physical symptoms of agoraphobia can include panic attacks, dizziness, heart palpitations, and feeling like you're going to faint or lose control. These symptoms often occur in anticipation of going somewhere, not just when actually in the feared situation, making even planning to leave home distressing. Agoraphobia is often comorbid with panic disorder, depression, and other anxiety disorders, creating a complex web of fears and avoidance behaviors that can be challenging to untangle. Treatment typically involves cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure therapy, and sometimes medication to manage panic symptoms while gradually expanding the person's comfort zone. Acrophobia, the height fear that grounds you. Acrophobia is like having your brain's safety system become so overprotective that it treats standing on a chair the same as standing on the edge of a cliff. It's an intense fear of heights that goes far beyond normal caution, creating panic responses to elevations that pose no real danger. This phobia has obvious evolutionary advantages. Our ancestors, who were appropriately cautious around cliffs, tall trees, and high places, were less likely to fall to their deaths. However, modern acrophobia often triggers in situations where falling isn't actually possible, like looking out the window of a tall building or standing on a sturdy balcony with railings. Acrophobia can cause physical symptoms including dizziness, vertigo, sweating, and feeling like you're going to fall even when you're nowhere near an edge. Some people experience the call of the void, an irrational urge to jump that's actually their brain's misinterpretation of the normal vertigo response. The fear often extends beyond just being at height to include watching others at height, seeing images or videos of high places, or even thinking about being up high. Some people with severe acrophobia can't watch movies with scenes shot from high angles, or look at photographs taken from tall buildings. Acrophobia can impact career choices, travel options, and recreational activities. People might avoid jobs in tall buildings, refuse to fly in airplanes, or miss out on scenic viewpoints and tourist attractions that involve any elevation. Treatment often involves exposure therapy, starting with very low heights and gradually working up, combined with relaxation techniques and cognitive restructuring to challenge catastrophic thoughts about heights. Virtual reality therapy has shown promising results for acrophobia, allowing controlled exposure to heights without actual physical risk. Trypophobia, the hole pattern that makes your skin crawl. Trypophobia is like having your brain's pattern recognition system malfunction and decide that clusters of small holes are existentially terrifying, even though they're completely harmless. It's one of the most recently recognized phobias, and it affects millions of people who feel intense disgust, anxiety, or fear when looking at patterns of small holes or bumps. This phobia might have evolutionary origins related to avoiding diseased or parasitized surfaces, poisonous animals with hole patterns, or decomposing organic matter. Your brain might be interpreting clustered hole patterns as signs of disease or contamination that should be avoided for health reasons. Trypophobia triggers can include lotus seed pods, honeycomb, soap bubbles, coral, certain fruits with clustered seeds, or even computer-generated images of hole patterns. The response is often described as feeling like something is crawling on your skin or an overwhelming urge to look away. What makes trypophobia particularly modern is how internet culture has amplified awareness of it. Many people discovered they had this phobia only after encountering trigger images online. And some researchers debate whether internet exposure has actually created or worsened the condition in some individuals. The physical symptoms can include nausea, goosebumps, sweating, and an intense feeling of disgust or revulsion. Unlike other phobias that cause fear, trypophobia often causes disgust as the primary emotion, which can be just as distressing and disruptive. Because trypophobia triggers are relatively uncommon in daily life, many people with this condition can avoid their triggers without significant lifestyle impact. However, for those with severe cases, even accidental exposure to trigger patterns can cause hours of distress and intrusive thoughts. Social phobia, the fear that everyone is watching. Social phobia, also known as social anxiety disorder, is like having your brain convince you that every social interaction is a performance being judged by a hostile audience that's just waiting for you to mess up. It's the fear of being judged, embarrassed, or rejected in social situations, and it affects about 12% of people at some point in their lives. This phobia likely evolved from the importance of social acceptance in early human communities, where being rejected by the group could literally mean death. Your brain inherited a social threat detection system that's designed to keep you accepted by the tribe, but in modern life, it often goes into overdrive and treats minor social mistakes as existential threats. Social phobia can manifest as fear of public speaking, eating in front of others, using public restrooms, attending parties, or even making phone calls. The fear often centers around doing something embarrassing or being judged as stupid, awkward, or inadequate by others. What makes social phobia particularly cruel is that it often prevents people from doing the very things that would help them overcome it: socializing, practicing social skills, and building confidence through positive social experiences. The avoidance maintains and strengthens the phobia over time. Physical symptoms can include blushing, sweating, trembling, rapid heartbeat, and feeling like your mind has gone blank. These visible symptoms often increase the person's anxiety because they worry that others will notice their nervousness and judge them for it. Social phobia can severely impact education, career advancement, and personal relationships. People might avoid job interviews, presentations, dating, or social events that could improve their quality of life, creating a cycle of isolation and missed opportunities that reinforces their belief that they're socially inadequate. Thanatophobia, the death fear that kills joy. Thanatophobia is like having your brain become obsessed with the one certainty in life that everyone else manages to ignore most of the time. It's an intense fear of death, either your own death or the death of loved ones, that goes beyond normal concerns about mortality and becomes a debilitating preoccupation with dying. This phobia often develops after a traumatic loss, near-death experience, or during periods of life transition where mortality becomes more salient. It can also emerge during midlife when people start confronting their own aging and the reality that their time is limited. Thanatophobia can manifest as constant worry about dying, obsessive thoughts about how you might die, avoidance of activities perceived as risky, or panic attacks triggered by thoughts of death or dying. Some people become hypervigilant about health symptoms, interpreting every minor ache as a sign of impending death. What makes thanatophobia particularly challenging is that death is the one fear that can't be completely irrational. Everyone will die eventually. This makes it harder to use traditional cognitive restructuring techniques that work for other phobias, since you can't argue that the feared outcome will never happen. The phobia can lead to avoidance of hospitals, funerals, medical procedures, or discussions about death and dying. Some people with thanatophobia avoid making long-term plans or commitments because they're convinced they won't live long enough to see them through. Treatment often focuses on acceptance-based approaches, mindfulness techniques, and existential therapy that helps people find meaning and purpose despite mortality rather than trying to eliminate awareness of death. The goal is learning to live fully despite death's inevitability rather than being paralyzed by it. Aviophobia, the flying fear that grounds dreams. Aviophobia is like having your brain refuse to accept that humans have figured out how to safely travel through the sky, insisting instead that airplanes are metal death traps that violate the natural order of things. It's the fear of flying that affects about 25% of people to some degree, making air travel anywhere from uncomfortable to completely impossible. This phobia often combines multiple fears: fear of heights, fear of enclosed spaces, fear of losing control, and fear of crashing. Your brain might rationally know that flying is statistically safer than driving, but your emotional brain doesn't care about statistics when you're 30,000 feet above the ground in a metal tube. Aviophobia can develop from various sources: turbulent flights, media coverage of plane crashes, claustrophobia triggered by airline seating, or even just the unfamiliar sensations of takeoff and landing. Sometimes it appears suddenly in people who previously flew without problems. The fear often involves catastrophic thinking about mechanical failures, terrorist attacks, pilot error, or severe weather. People with aviophobia might obsessively research plane crash statistics, scrutinize every sound the aircraft makes, or interpret normal turbulence as signs of impending disaster. Physical symptoms can include panic attacks during takeoff, nausea, sweating, and hyperventilation. Some people start experiencing anxiety days or weeks before a scheduled flight, and others might avoid air travel entirely, limiting career opportunities and personal travel. Treatment often involves education about aviation safety, relaxation techniques, and gradual exposure therapy. Some programs offer flight simulation experiences or even accompanied flights with a therapist to help people overcome their fear in a controlled environment. The conclusion: fear is more universal than you think. So there you have it. Every major phobia explained, from the spider fears that make people abandon entire rooms to the death anxiety that can make life itself feel threatening. Understanding phobias is like getting a glimpse into the security system your brain uses to keep you safe, except sometimes that security system has way too many false alarms. The fascinating thing about phobias is that they reveal how your survival instincts, which evolved to keep you alive in prehistoric environments, can become maladaptive in modern life. Your brain is still scanning for saber-toothed tigers and poisonous spiders, even though you're more likely to be injured by a vending machine than either of those threats. But here's what's important to understand. Phobias aren't just extreme versions of normal fears, and they're not character flaws or signs of weakness. They're legitimate medical conditions that involve real changes in brain chemistry and neural pathways that make certain situations feel genuinely life-threatening, even when they're objectively safe. The good news is that phobias are among the most treatable mental health conditions. Exposure therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and other evidence-based treatments have success rates of 80 to 90% for most specific phobias. The bad news is that many people suffer unnecessarily because they're too embarrassed to seek help or don't realize treatment is available. Whether you're afraid of spiders, heights, social situations, or the inevitability of death, remember that millions of other people share your fears and that effective help exists. Your phobia might feel irrational to you, but it makes perfect sense to your brain's ancient threat detection system. Your brain's job is to keep you alive, not to make you happy or help you live an adventurous life. Sometimes the very systems that keep you safe also keep you trapped, but understanding how phobias work is the first step toward reclaiming the freedom to live without being controlled by fear. If this exploration of human fears made you realize that your own anxieties aren't as weird or uncommon as you thought, smash that like button, subscribe for more psychology that normalizes the weird ways human brains work, and drop a comment letting me know which phobia you found most relatable or surprising. Trust me, we're all afraid of something that doesn't make logical sense. Apparently, that's just part of being human with an overprotective prehistoric brain.